Hello, welcome to another Actung review. Today I am doing the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Great band. I do love this band, although I don't think they would be in my top 10 bands. They were at one point, especially back in high school for me. I would have said they were. Um, but as I've sort of gone on to, especially stuff I'm into now, I don't listen to the Chili Peppers as much. Although there are a couple of albums that still stay with me. Um, Yeah, I do love this band, and in doing this, I did find out that there wasn't a distinctive Red Hot Chili Peppers album that I just know and love, and I just grab onto like I do for Iron Maiden or U2 or Zeppelin. Even I could easily, I knew that Number 4 was going to be my top Zeppelin album. I knew that Power Slave was going to be my top Maiden album. I knew that Rock and Roller was going to be my top Kiss album. So I knew all that. Doing this, I actually kept changing around the top 3 or 4. Some of them went to number 1, some went to number 2, some of them went to different places. Eventually I've settled on this. This is sort of how I feel at the moment. This could change. Any of these lists could change, but this is how I feel about them at the moment. But judging, this is also, I have got lists of all these. I've always made sort of lists of stuff like this because it's something I enjoy, and I enjoy going to. I live in Newcastle, for those who don't know, which is anyone who's watching not in Australia, is 3 hours north of Sydney, and since, if you can see, I'm a big record collector and stuff for some rare stuff and some really cool stuff. I enjoy going to Sydney and going into all those record shops, and generally on the train ride down, I usually have a notebook and I'm writing words or poems or lists. So a bunch of these I've taken old lists and just sort of updated them and made sure that I still feel the same way. So yeah, this is how I feel about Chili Peppers now. I don't see a lot of these changing, or at least the region that they are. The ones that are down the bottom, I think will stay down the bottom. The ones at the top, I think, will stay at the top. Whether my number 1 stays my number 1 and my number 3 stays number 3, we'll find out. But anyway, let's get into it. My number 11 are the worst Red Hot Chili Peppers album as far as I'm concerned, and I am happy to say worst because I do not think this is a good album, and that is the debut in 1984. I do not think it's a good album. I do love listening to debut albums because they capture a band at its most innocent time, because that's obviously a band's first time in the studio, first time discovering, okay, we've had all these songs and stuff that seem to have worked, let's put them down. There's sort of a bit of naivety and innocence about it, sort of your debut album. That's very clear on this album, but it's also very clear that the Chili Peppers were in a mess at this point. I remember the first time I listened to this album, I thought it's a bit off, and then I went and read Anthony Kiedis' book Scar Tissue, and I now understand why. The original lineup of the Chili Peppers is Flea, Anthony Kiedis, Hillel Slovak, and Jack Irons. Jack Irons and Hillel Slovak were another band when they formed the Chili Peppers, and that band was doing significantly better just before the making of this album, and so they left to be with the other band, which was called What's This, or What This, something like that. And Flea and Anthony got Jack Sherman on guitar and Cliff Martinez on drums. I think they did. Cliff Martinez, I think, did okay. I don't think Jack Sherman guitar playing is that great. I'm not gonna lie, and he's definitely very different to Slovak, and I think that really got to Anthony Kiedis, and read Kiedis' book, that I think that really got to him by a certain point, and I think the album suffered because of that, because of they didn't have the original lineup. The producer Andy Gill, I think there were some stories about him and stuff. It just wasn't a great debut. There's some good songs on here. Police Helicopter I like. Out in LA is pretty good. Get Up and Jump's not bad. My favourite on this album is True Men Don't Kill Coyotes, which is probably the only reason I ever put this album on. And after that, I think, I might listen to Police Helicopter. If I put it on, I put it on this version because it's got the bonus tracks, it's got the demos, which are much better than the actual album, I think. One, because they do have Slayback and Irons playing, and I think they have more feel, personality to them than this actual album does. So, there you go. Number 11 is the debut. Number 10 is 1995's One Hot Minute, the album that followed up the massive Blood Sugar Sex Magic album. And also the first and only album with Dave Navarro on guitar. What I like about Chili Peppers is every time they brought in a new guitarist, the band sounds different. Even on that album, even though that's the first impression you get with the Chili Peppers if you were listening from the start, or if you bought that album, or even if you've started from the bottom and worked your way out, you definitely know that that sounds very different to when Hello Slovak actually joined the Chili Peppers. Same with this is very different. And because Dave Navarro came from James Addiction was a bit of a glam band, if I remember correctly. I'm not a big James Addiction fan, I will admit. But James Addiction were more of a rock band and stuff, so and weren't really the sort of funk and rap rock that the Chili Peppers were at the time. And I think that really changed the Chili Peppers. This album changed the Chili Peppers sound for the albums that followed. But there was something clearly missing on this album. Also with this album, Anthony Kiedis started to use drugs again. After being sober for a extended length of time. My Friends is obviously the standout track on this album. Aeroplane would be the next. And then after that, I like Coffee Shop, Warped, Tearjerker. Beat Kick's okay, that's about it. Again, not an album I go back to, but My Friends, I think, is a really good Chili Peppers song. Number 9 is the 2011 I'm With You. I was saying that when Chili Peppers bring in new guitarists, they often bring new sounds. This one probably be the only exception, partly due to the fact that John Frusciante left very abruptly. I think they were starting to talk about the making of this album after the whole Stadium Arcadium thing and the tour had done and wrapped up. After all that, and I can't remember when it was announced in like 2009. I think when it was officially announced that Frusciante was leaving again, but when he told the band, I'm not 100% sure. Whether he told them just before the announcement or whether he told them on the tour. But John Frusciante left. I think the Chili Peppers were in a bit of a panic. To sort of keep the success that they had going. They'd had a string of albums that were, selling millions in pre-order. I don't know if that's true. That's probably an exaggeration, but that's how big and how, much these albums were selling, and how, the Chili Peppers become this massive band, even bigger than they were in the 90s, in the early 90s and late 80s. And to keep that success going, I think they tried to sort of make an album that sort of was in a similar vein to those albums. This features new guitarist Josh Klinghoffer. I think in that case is why I generally skipped over it. It wasn't, when I first put it on, it wasn't a particularly a favourable album. I didn't mind. I just thought Factory of Faith, Brendan's Death Song were good songs. Look Around, it's not bad. But my favourite, of course, was the single Adventures of Rain Dance Maggie. Not a favourite album. It's one I generally miss. It was the last album they did with Rick Rubin, also, who had done every Chili Peppers album since Blood Sugar. And I think that's good because the album that followed this is a new sound, a new sort of band, and I actually thought that they did that a bit better, but we'll get to that. There's my number 9. I'm with you, 2011. Number 8 is Freaky Styley from 1985. The return of Hillel Slovak on guitar, even though a lot of the songs were actually written by the lineup with Jack Sherman on guitar. Although there are a couple of songs in here that are written by Hillel Slovak and Jack Irons, so they obviously didn't use everything that Hillel Slovak and Jack Irons had written with the band before they left. But on the first album, but a lot of this album was written with the previous lineup. However, given that fact, I think this is definitely better than the debut. For one, if you watch, it has George Clinton on producer, who did a much better job than Andy Gill. I don't know what the Andy Gill's relationship with the band was up in the making of that album and after the making of that album, but I think George Clinton really got the Chili Peppers, and especially where the Chili Peppers were at this time in their career. And Anthony Kiedis has said that this is one of his favourite sort of albums because one of his favourite moments in his career is getting to work with George Clinton. And I think it shows. George Clinton, I think, really got the Chili Peppers for their early stages. I would love to have known if this was their debut, and whether the first Chili Peppers album could have been produced by George Clinton. But this is clearly a much. It sounds a lot more funner and happier than that album, their debut. There's footage of those recording sessions somewhere. I've seen them in documentaries, and I think you can see them on YouTube. It just looks fun. Looks like the Chili Peppers actually having fun recording the album, and George Clinton's getting involved and stuff. So I think this was definitely a better album than the debut, but I think the album that followed this was definitely much better. But there's still some great songs in here. Jungle Man's a great song. I love the song Black Eyed Blonde. That's probably my favourite off this album. You got Sex Rap, it's a good song. Catholic Schoolgirls Rule, Brothers Cup. The cover of Hollywood's actually pretty good. Yeah, good album. I really enjoy it. I do enjoy it. But there are better albums with the name Red Hot Chili Peppers to it. Like this one, my number 7 is, by the way, I know a lot of people love this album. This is probably some people's favourite Chili Peppers album. This is in the sort of run of albums I was talking about in the late 2000s. And I agree. This is a good album. It's got songs that still hear on the radio, still played live. You've got By the Way, Universally Speaking, Zephyr Song, Can't Stop. Don't Forget Me still gets played live, I've seen. Those were probably your big hits. Every guitarist I ever met at school at least learned Can't Stop once, or talked about how the teacher tried to show them Can't Stop. It's a cool riff. Don't get me wrong, it's a great riff. But I think that song is a little overrated. I enjoy the song, don't get me wrong. But I don't feel the same about it as I did at one point. These albums, I think, the problem with the CD, there are some bands that did this. There are some bands that is that they saw, okay, instead of having 20 to 30 minutes aside on vinyl and having 60 minutes, we now have 80-minute CDs, so we can do 80 minutes worth of music, which is, for a compilation album, is good, I think, because that way you can sort of expand on certain things. So you can have the hits, certain deep cuts and stuff. For a new studio album, that is a long album. I'm sorry. I listen to I like prog music. I listen to a lot of prog stuff. And trust me, they do long songs, but their albums are still only 50 minutes long. One of my favourite prog albums, Hemispheres by Rush, I think is under 40 minutes, and it has a 20-minute song on it. So I think if you look here, this is 16 songs over 68 minutes of music. This is right there. That's a long time to sit and listen to it, and I think the back half of this album suffers because of that. And the same with the album after this and the album before it. Although I think the album before it was actually one song less, and I think a lot of those songs actually, you can argue that should be that album because those songs are actually really good. I think some of these aren't. However, and also I forgot to mention, this album does have my favourite Chili Peppers song of all time on this album, which is the song Venice Queen. I love that song. I think that's a brilliant song. And when I will see the Chili Peppers live at some point, I know I will. I hope they play that song. So yeah, my number 7's By the Way. Number 6 is 1987's The Uplift Mofo Party Plan. This is the album that followed Freaky Styley. It's definitely better, and partly because it's the only Chili Peppers album to feature the original lineup. Hallelujah. And I don't think an album will showcase that band better than this album. They didn't work with George Clinton, I think, which is a bit of a shame because I do love what he did with them on Freaky Styley. However, the bloke who did produce this album, Michael, what is his name? Michael Bion, something like that. I can't remember how you say his last name. I think he did a decent job with what this album was. For what was big at the time, which was 87, you had hair, glam metal and new wave were the big genres at the time. 87, this was the same year that Guns N' Roses released Appetite for Destruction, U2 released the Joshua Tree, INXS released Kick. There was a bunch of huge albums that year. 1987 was a really good year for music, and this was a good album for Chili Peppers. This actually finally set the Chili Peppers in a direction to go, and I think this is an album that the record company actually liked. It was the first album that actually went gold. It actually sold well, whereas the other two albums didn't. And so yeah, the only bad thing is it's the last album to feature Jack Irons and Hello Slovak. After the tour for this album, Hello Slovak tragically passed away of a heroin overdose at the age of 26. It's a shame he never made it to 27 Club, which is so tragic. It really affected the band to the point where Jack Irons couldn't fathom playing without him, so he left, which is why they ended up getting Chad Smith in, who's been in the band ever since. And it really did affect Anthony at the time, because Anthony and Hello are both big heroin users, and they said on tour was that they knew it was heroin was becoming a problem, that it was an addiction that was becoming a problem. It wasn't just a way to sort of get high and release yourself from the world. Not that heroin ever is. And on the tour for this album, they really had formed like a bond, and they really helped each other to stay off heroin. It was really working. The only problem is after you make an album and tour for a year with the same four guys, you get kind of sick of them. And the problem was at the end of this tour is that everyone sort of went off into their own little corner, and Anthony and Hello didn't have that support for each other. Anthony also relapsed while he was away. It just, lucky for him, it just wasn't fatal. And then when Hello died, they found Hello's body a couple of days actually after he passed away, because no one get in touch with him. And then after a couple of days of just trying to ring him, they finally went to his hotel room, broke the door down, and found his body had clearly been dead for a couple of days. It's just so sad, and like I said, really affected Anthony. And to this day, even in the latest Chili Peppers album, he still writes songs for and about Hillel. And I think another thing is that I'm glad he made this album, but I wish the next album that will follow, which is the album Mother's Milk, I really wish he got to make that album, because without Hillel Slovak, everyone loves John Frusciante. I'll agree. He's probably the best Chili Peppers guitarist, mainly due to the longevity. He's been in there longer. He's played on more successful albums. Fair enough. However, there is no John Frusciante without Hillel Slovak. John Frusciante was a big Chili Peppers fan at the time, which is partly why he got the gig, because he was a big fan. He used to go to a lot of their shows, and I think he was actually friends with Hillel, and that partly helped him get the gig. So yeah, really cool album. Some sad tragedies to it, but there are a lot of great songs on here. This was my favourite Chili Peppers album at one point, and it's now number 6, just because I think it's just sort of growing up a bit. I think these albums are actually better. This album, my number 5, was very tight. I listened to them a lot last night and was very sort of, I want to keep them both at number 5, but obviously you can't. And I think the back half of this album isn't great, which is why I ended up giving my number 5 spot to Californication. This is my favourite Chili Peppers album cover. I think that's a fantastic cover. I did a bunch of like album cover things for my HSC in arts, and one of the covers was this album. Legendary album. It's fantastic. It's got Californication, Scar Tissue, and Other Side, which you still hear on the radio, and you got fan favourites and songs that Chili Peppers still play live and that fans love, as like Around the World, Parallel Universe, stuff like that. And some really cool songs. Easily, Porcelain, Road Trippin', Right on Time, all cool songs. You can't go wrong with this album. This is the album before, by the way, and I said these albums struggle with being long and having a lot of songs. This is an album you could probably argue it can stay at this length, because pretty much all these songs are really good and deserve to be on here. However, if it was my personal opinion, I would strip it back a couple of songs. I would take off This Velvet Glove, Amatrice, and I do like Saviour, but if it was on the album, I'm not going to lie, I wouldn't miss it. Really cool song. This, however, does have the song Purple Stain, which is a really cool song for me. Back in my Chili Peppers sort of heyday, back when I was super into Chili Peppers, one of my best mates, Jake Craig, we both did art and entertainment together, and we did a colour class together. But these are the main two I remember, where we would sort of sit at the back of the classroom and just start doing Chili Peppers songs a cappella, and the main one we would do was Purple Stain. One of us would start the bass line, the intro riff. The other one would start singing the verses, and then we'd start trading off. One would do the music, one would do the vocals. There are other songs we would do that for too, but Purple Stain is the main one that comes to mind. And every time I hear that song, I just think about that. This is really cool. Number 4 is The Getaway. This album really crept up a lot. I had this album originally at like number 7, number 6. It's grown on me a lot. It's an album that, I said, this album came out at the height of my Chili Peppers fandom, which is probably why I like it a lot. I'll never forget the weekend, well, the day actually, well, it came out, but the weekend actually, I spent listening to, it was a shit weekend. It was just raining. There was something that was really, looking back on it, is not really a big deal, but at the time I kind of treated it like one, and it was sort of to me at that time. But looking back on it, I really shouldn't have made a huge deal out of it. But anyway, just how I was feeling at the time, this album just sort of represented. This album does feel a lot sort of darker in a sense than most albums. And just the sound of it is not sort of this sort of upbeat, sort of funkier, sort of, you know, I don't want to say hippie, but the Chili Peppers have been sort of known to sort of be a colourful band, shall we say. Like they're not really a band that just sticks to like black and grey and have songs about how the world's going to end. However, there are some sort of darker songs on here than usual. I think stuff like The Hunter and Dark Necessities and even something like Goodbye Angels is a bit dark. And you got Feasting on the Flowers, which is about Hillel. Again. But yeah, I remember this album. My keen memory of listening to this album is I remember that weekend it was pissing down rain, and I just remember inside just having enough of everything. I remember it sort of calmed down. I went for a walk. Just at the end of my street, there's a park, and if you cross the park, there's a bus stop. And I remember just walking over to the bus stop, and there's a bus coming. And I got on the bus and went into town. I just remember walking around town listening to this album for about an hour or so. And that's sort of the scenery I picture whenever I listen to this album. Quite nostalgic for me, but again, it has grown on me and has proved that, you know, it is actually, I think, a really good Chili Peppers album. The last to feature Josh Klinghoffer. And again, this is the album that followed I'm With You. A whole new sound to the Chili Peppers, and I think one that I think is actually really good. It actually suits the Chili Peppers. This sound more than the sort of edgier sort of stuff that Dave Navarro was trying to throw in. But yeah, great record, I think. Really has grown on me. Number 3. This is my favourite Chili Peppers album at one point. But it's just too long. It is really long, and that album is Stadium Arcadium. I'm sorry. I love 90% of it. I will listen to 90% of this album, no problem. If you were to sit down and say, like, let's do it, I absolutely agree to that. However, this could easily be shortened down to one disc. I think this was a lot. It took me forever to listen to the songs, especially on the second disc. I don't think I listened. I think I bought this album and didn't listen to the second disc until a week or so after I bought the album. Just because even the first 14 tracks is just enough to sort of get through, listen to and actually take in. This should have been 2 separate albums. I actually I've got a thing here that I'll get to in a minute. There's some really good songs in here, don't get me wrong. I do love this album. However, some songs I could do without. And what I've actually got here is a thing I did last night, because I thought, if I'm going to say this, I should actually do it. So this here is an Stadium Arcadium shortened. I think this would be a kick-ass album. Just remember, this is my personal opinion, as much as this list. This is mainly made up of songs that I love off this album, not songs that are successful. Because one major album, the biggest song on here arguably is Denny California, and I've left out of this. Partly because I do not like Denny California, or anymore. I didn't mind it when I first heard it, but I'm so sick of it now. I do not like it. There's usually one sort of big song on each band that I love that I just hate, or just really dislike. And for me, for Chili Peppers, that's Danny California. I don't ever have to listen. If I never hear Danny California again, happy days. I'm not going to go complaining if I never hear it again. But here's what I've got as a shortened Stadium Arcadium. I did it roughly on the sort of by the way Californication sort of thing. I've done 16 songs, because I think if the Chili Peppers were to do a single album, this is sort of what it would look like. So, and I've kind of ordered them to sort of fit, like, hopefully sound like a Chili Peppers. Like, I started with a real rocker, a real up tempo sort of more Chili Peppers style song, and then ended with a sort of slower song, which they've always seemed to do. So here you go. Here's my shorter Stadium Arcadium album. If Stadium Arcadium was taken and it looked like this, it would be my favourite album. So here's what I've got. I've got Torture Me, She's Only 18, Desecration Smile, Snow, Charlie, Ready Made, Come On Girl, Wet Sand, She Looks to Me, Storm in a Teacup, Animal Bar, You Make Me Feel Better, not Make You Feel Better, sorry, Slow Cheater, We Believe, Turn It Again, and Death of a Martian. That for me is a killer album. And I've got bonus track Stadium Arcadium. I know what you're thinking, how can you call the album Stadium Arcadium without Stadium Arcadium? Well, simple, there are bands in history that have released, like Led Zeppelin released an album called Houses of the Holy. Later on, there was now Physical Graffiti had the song Houses of the Holy. The Doors released an album called Waiting for the Sun. A couple of albums later, the song Waiting for the Sun appeared on the album Morrison Hotel. You can do that. But, you know, I do like the name Stadium Arcadium, so I probably would leave that, but if you're like, no, you got to change it because it's done their Stadium Arcadium, I'd probably call it Animal Bar, probably, or Storm in a Teacup. I think they're good titles for an album. So there you go, there's my shortened Stadium Arcadium. I'm actually going to make that into a playlist, so I've got a good version of that album. Alright, top 2. Jeez, we've been going for a while. Sorry if this is a bit long, but I just have a fair bit to talk about. My number 2 is Mother's Milk. Yeah, number 2, Mother's Milk. Really good album. First album with Frusciante and Chad Smith. Some really cool songs in here. The cover of Stevie Wonder's High Ground is one of the best stuff. The tribute on here to Magic Johnson, I love. Knock Me Down is about Hillel. Taste of Pain, I love. The cover of I got a cover of Jimi Hendrix's Fire on here. Hillel Slovak was a big Jimi Hendrix fan, and that cover was actually first on an EP that was just released before this album called the Abbey Road EP, which is basically just a bunch of songs. I think they recorded at Abbey Road, or they recorded at some point, and the cover is just them walking across Abbey Road in their socks. Like I said, I wish Hillel got to make this album, because it probably was, again, Frusciante probably copied Hillel, but he does have his own take on it. Unlike Klinghoffer and I'm With You, I feel that very much is, he's trying to do John Frusciante 101. I feel like John Frusciante's trying to do John Frusciante, but also give tribute to Hillel Slovak. I don't think there's a bad song on this album, which is why I had it at my number 1, but I thought, because there is one bad song on my number 1, but I think all the songs on my number 1 overdo this album, and that's why my number 1 is Blood Sugar Sex Magic. I was going to wear I do have a shirt for this album. It's probably my favourite Chili Peppers shirt, but I thought that would have given away what my number 1 album is. This is a fantastic record from start to finish. Like I said, there's only one bad song on here, and that's the greeting song. I really wish they'd sort of get rid of that. But again, it doesn't take away from the album, and the rest of the album is that good that for me, even though there's one bad song, I still think the rest of the album is still better than Mother's Milk. From The Power of Equality, great song. If You Have to Ask, Breaking the Girl, Suck My Kiss. I could have lied. One of my favourite Chili Peppers songs. Same with Mellow Slip, Slinky and B Major. One of my absolute all-time favourite Chili Peppers songs. The title track, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, I love. So Psycho Sexy, really cool song. Another one me and Jake used to sing at the back of art class. And then of course what shot this album out, made this album best selling and great album it is obviously Under the Bridge. Sort of similar to Down in California, I'm a little bit sick of Under the Bridge, but not to the extent of Down in California. I can still listen to Under the Bridge and enjoy it. I don't feel that way about Denny California anymore. Alright, so you go, this one number 1. So you go, there are my Chili Peppers albums. Thank you. Hope you have a good day. I'll see you next week for the next 2 bands I do. Thank you. Bye.